Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the first decan of Capricorn. I hope that you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon out there and that you've had a wonderful holiday season thus far. We're going to be breaking down the new moon in the first 10 degrees of Capricorn for you today. We're going to talk about Saturn. We're going to talk about its host being in Pisces. We're going to talk about some of the Mars retrograde opposite Pluto challenges inherent in that new moon. We're going to talk about Mars, the moon, and Mars being out of bounds during this period as well. And then we'll take you through how it's going to unfold in the week or so ahead. So I hope that you're doing well out there. If you're just joining us, make sure you leave me a comment and let me know how you're doing. Rachel Fletcher is joining us from Roanoke, Virginia. How you doing, Rachel? Nice to see you, friend. Hope that you're doing well. Having a wonderful holiday season over there. Always lovely to see your face here on the broadcast. Okay, so I'm going to make a few announcements first before we welcome some more friends here. So, it's almost 2025, friends, and if you go over to my website, spencermichaud.com, you can find offerings that I have for the year ahead. I offer a number of different readings, including a mythos reading where I break down your mythological stories inherent in your natal chart and your natal promise. Do a Kairos reading where we are looking at your next 3 months ahead and breaking it down in great detail. Also do astrological tutoring and have a number of class offerings coming up as well. So check that out over at spencermichaud.com. You can book a reading at the Book Now button. You can also find some of my previous webinars that I've given in the past on the store button. So make sure to check that out and make sure you subscribe to our newsletter too. That's how you can figure out where new classes and offerings are coming down the pike. I do have a Dignity and Devotion webinar coming up with my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews, on February the 8th. So this is the second Saturday in February, and we're going to be going and looking at all of the mythological significations, all the dignities and debilities of the sun. We're going to be talking about how to craft a magical and ritual practice with the sun. And these have been really great webinars so far. We've been going about 3.5 to 4 hours each one, and Tanya's an excellent teacher, and I'm really excited to be, highlighting her expertise in this as well. So you can find that on the Book Now button on my website, spencermichaud.com. I hope you'll join us for that. If you missed out on the Moon, Mercury, and Venus, those are for sale in the store right now as well. And of course, my beautiful partner Tanya has an Etsy account called Third Coast Mojo, where she sells her wonderfully magically elected oils, soaps, bath salts, etc. And she's having a holiday sale till the end of the year. So if you use the code MaryMojo25, you can get 25% off anything in the store. So I hope you'll take advantage of that and support Tanya's work. And then finally, if you want to support the work that I'm doing here today, you can hit the little $ in the chat on YouTube, buying a super chat. Or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and support the channel that way. That's sort of a Patreon type account where it helps me keep the lights on, it helps purchase the equipment and the books to do all the research, and buys me the gift of time to do all of this work and to continue to be a self-employed astrologer. So thank you so much for your support in that, and appreciate all of you. All right, friends. So that's what we got for our announcements. Thank you for sitting through that. Robin Nadira is here. What's up, Robins? Robin from Northern California. Looking forward to learning about the new moon in Capricorn 1. Nice to see you, Robin. Hope you're doing well. Having a nice holiday over there on the West Coast. Dimfy's here. What's up, Dimfy? Nice to see you. I believe Dimfy is joining us from the Netherlands. Nice to see you, Dimfy. Hope everything's going well your way as well. All right. So we are looking at this new moon to start off the year, kind of the end of the 2024 season. The new moon in Capricorn is going to be on Monday, December the 30th of 2024. The new moon on Monday, as Duran Duran likes to say. And we're going to be looking at a 9-degree Capricorn moon. And so let's bring this chart up and we'll see what we've got going on here. We'll break it down in great detail. We'll go through some of the teaching slides around Capricorn 1 and get you all ready to new moon. We got some nice other friends coming in here. Mystical Blooms is here. Hello. Says hi everyone from super snowy Canada. Nice to see you, Mystical Blooms. Hope you're doing well, friend. Benel Dell, Laura is here. Says happy last Friday of the societal agreed upon year. Yes, that's a good point, Laura. That's the I like to do my intentions at the beginning of Capricorn. We'll talk about that. Like the kind of the return of the light is sort of my new year. I've been experiencing that the last few days, and it's been really nice. We've been having some really good restructuring conversations. So we'll talk about that moving forward too, friend. KP is here. What's up, KP? Says hi, Spencer. And all this new moon is on my 9-degree Capricorn sun. Oh my goodness, KP. Well, happy early solar return, friend. And I'm so grateful you're able to join us here today. I believe from Cleveland, Ohio. It's really a pleasure to see you here in the chat. Okay, so we're looking at this new moon, Capricorn 1. And we are going to be experiencing this on the 30th, 9 degrees of Capricorn. And a couple just features of this. Let's just do the big picture first. Of course, we've got that first decan. The moon is going to be in its exile, which is a challenging position for the moon. This is a place where the moon is a little bit uncomfortable, potentially, where the resources that we might be working with are a little bit harder to come by. We have to work a little bit harder to get the support that we need potentially. But the sun is going to be giving us an awareness of where we want to build our structures moving forward. My partner and I have been doing kind of a deep, not only a deep clean of our house. She has some time off in between the now and the new year. But we've been kind of auditing our systems, our material systems. And sometimes there's some challenging conversations that come up with that, but I think it's been really productive, actually. It's been, we've been kind of not just taking stock of what we accomplished over the course of the year, but also our failures, our challenges, the things we wish we would have gotten done but failed to do so. And then looking at how our daily habits and routines are either supporting or hindering those accomplishments or failures, etc. And we've been really implementing some really nice new systems to be able to catch life, I guess you could say. And I think that this is something that's really supported around this time of year, like really evaluating how you've done in the past. And that can inform how you want to build your new material structures moving forward. Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign. It's an initiatory sign. We're starting a new material process. So we're taking stock of all the material resources that we have. Like a lot of times people are kind of doing their taxes at the end of the year to get prepared for the year ahead. Sometimes people in business situations will make purchases at the end of the year for the next year for their business. So this is a great time to really look at the bones of, bones being related to Saturn, the bones of your life, to really strip things down to the essentials and see what are really the support systems that you have in your life. And again, these assets that you have are not just material assets. The assets that you have are your community, your friends, your family members, your skills, your grace, the pets that you have in your life. All those things can be assets, right? So thinking about how your skills can help you to build the life that you want to live. And one of the things we've been trying to do that I think has been really helpful is not just having a to-do list, because that can get endless and it's very hard to cross things off, because the list keeps growing. But some of the productivity management people suggest thinking about what are the ethics that you want to embody. Okay, what type of person do you want to be? And I think that is a better question to ask at this time of year, because then that can lead to some real important realizations about what you want to do to be that person. Do you want to be someone who is a reader, who is a consistent reader? Do you want to be someone who exercises daily? Do you want to be someone that, calls a friend at least once or twice a week? These are the types of things that you ask yourself. Who do you want to be? Not what do you want to get or achieve, but what type of person do you want to be? So we've got that new moon. We'll talk a little bit more about this moon here, but the moon is going to be out of bounds. So this is an out of bounds moon. When the moon's out of bounds, it's sort of a challenging position for a planet, the moon, or other planets. We'll talk about Mars out of bounds today too. But when the moon's out of bounds, our bodies are sort of pushed to a different space than we are normally used to. Sometimes our emotions are a little bit heightened. Other times our bodies feel a little bit tired because we're doing something that's outside of the norm. So we may feel a little bit taxed with our bodies. And this is a really important connection to make with this decan of Capricorn, because there's a spirit in this decan called Asclepius, and Asclepius was the healer on the ship of the Argo in Greek mythology. So he had this really important healing ability where he could almost raise people from the dead, and that sort of angered some of the Olympian gods, because Hades wasn't getting souls in the underworld, and eventually Zeus kind of struck him down for his healing powers. But I think that one of the things we can learn from that is that to be able to achieve ambitious projects, to be able to be who we want to be and live up to our highest potential, which Capricorn is often considered an aspirational sign, like the mountain goat climbing the mountain one step at a time. We have to take care of our vehicles. We have to take care of our bodies. So really thinking about what types of foods we eat, what types of things that we drink. Like, for example, this week I'm experimenting with drinking about a gallon of water a day, which I feel great, but that is a lot of water, and it is many trips to the loo, as they say in England. But it's good. It's flushing out all the toxins in your body. It's helping to reset things. So just considering what you're putting into your body will really be helpful for moving you forward towards being a great vehicle for where your spirit wants to take you, right? The spirit sometimes can be willing, but if the body is not functional, it can be really hard to manifest. And, this is, not everyone has the same wealth of health either. So this can be very relative as well. Some people live with chronic illnesses, and their best might be on a different scale than someone who doesn't deal with some of those challenges. So wherever you're at in your own personal health journey, that can be something to consider. So we have the moon out of bounds. We have a Saturn host. So we're looking at Saturn here, and it's sextile. So this is a harmonious aspect to the new moon. So this is Saturn hosting the new moon from Pisces. It itself is gaining resources from Jupiter. So this kind of like interesting little triangle we have here. Jupiter is providing resources for Mercury, and they're kind of I think they're in mutual reception right now, which means they're exchanging resources. So this is sort of the energetic flow here. We've got the new moon that is receiving resources from Saturn, which is receiving resources from Jupiter, and then there's this circuit of exchange between Jupiter and Mercury, both of which are in their exile. So we may have some uncomfortable moments with this particular new moon. We want to move forward. We have a lot of thoughts about unifying body and spirit with Mercury in Sagittarius too. We have Jupiter kind of splitting our attention in a lot of different directions. This has been another conversation we've been having in our household, is both Tanya and I have you could consider it some attention challenges sometimes. I like to think of it as the liminal space that we both inhabit, being 12th house suns. And for me, I'm a 12th house Mercury, and she's a 12th house Venus. And sometimes when you live in a liminal space, the space in between worlds, I guess, if you aren't familiar with that term, sometimes it can be difficult to manage time and to be aware of how long a task is taking, or your attention may get split in a different direction because you see some kind of symbol out in the world. For me, I'm awash in symbolic language all day long. Like everything that comes into my awareness can be interpreted as some kind of metaphor or symbol, which is not always functional for like folding your laundry or like washing your dishes or things of that nature. So when you know that you have those types of neurodivergences, how can you create the right type of organizational systems to catch those when you are uh, prone to being distracted? So Saturn is helping us to understand our limitations. Saturn in Pisces 2 says it's important not to overestimate what you're capable of doing in the time allotted. Saturn is often associated with time. One of the challenges that my partner and I have is we have a little bit of time blindness. So we will under or overestimate the amount of time that a task takes. So when you do that, what you need to do in your life, what we're discovering, is create more space. So create more space for the tasks that you want to get done. Don't overestimate your ability. If you have time blindness, like my partner and I do sometimes, take your list and then kind of cut it in half. Like, and say, okay, we know that we think this task is going to take an hour. Let's allot 2 or 3 hours for it. And then, because what that does is that allows you not to beat yourself up or have self-recrimination when you inevitably fall short of your expectations, right? Saturn in Pisces 2, I think, is very important for the gap. Okay, Ira Glass is he's an excellent podcast host, This American Life, and he talks about the gap between our abilities and our expectations or our taste. And the only way that you close that gap is through doing a great amount of work, right? But I think we can close the gap of expectations by not only doing a great amount of work, but changing how much allotment we give to that, right? How much allotment of time, how much allotment of resources, etc. I think one of the things when you are a somewhat liminal space person, someone who has a great awareness of the connections in between physical reality, sometimes it can be really challenging to understand the rules of incarnation. This is the opposite sign of Virgo, which talks about the rules of incarnation, of learning what is possible, what isn't, what is the reality of this. And Pisces is sort of like the dream world that connects everything, the mycelial networks that are behind reality. And when Saturn is in that Pisces place, it does a couple things. First of all, Saturn is a planet that is sobering. So we're getting a sober reality check about the connections in the spiritual world to the material world. Sometimes it can feel like a barrier between our dream and a manifestation of it. Other times, Saturn can castrate. Okay, Kronos, in the story of Saturn, aka Kronos, he castrated his father Uranus, and from that castration was born Aphrodite. The genitals fell into the sea and mixed with the sea foam, and there was Aphrodite. But Saturn is castrating possibilities into concrete reality. And what I mean by that is when Saturn says no, when Saturn says you can't possibly do all of these things right now, it is allowing you to see which of those things you can do in the time, space, resource that you have available to you. So I think Saturn is really teaching us that is, hey, like you may think you have the right plan, the right organizational system, but you might be a little bit overestimating your ability. Second decan of Pisces in particular speaks towards apprentice energy, like the sorcerer's apprentice, right? Where we're sort of trying to fly before we're ready, trying to drive the chariot of the sun. And I'll show you this in a second. But we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But let's look at just some of the other big picture thoughts here. We also have Pluto coming into an opposition with Mars retrograde, or Mars retrograde, more accurately, coming into an opposition with Pluto, because Mars is the faster moving planet. So this is going to be peaking around, January the 3rd. And we're dealing with maybe fear around social issues, fear around technological issues, asserting our own will versus the will of the collective or the group, reevaluating how we show up and assert ourselves, how we take responsibility or how we take authority. And there can be conflicts involved with that. There can be challenges involved with that. You may be reevaluating how you show up for life, the pressure that you feel to perform or the pressure that you feel to be visible versus the desire for anonymity. Those are challenges we can see with Mars retrograde opposite Pluto. And we don't always have all the answers in the moment. Sometimes we have conflicts that lead to challenging feelings and thoughts and exchanges, and hopefully they can be learning experiences and opportunities for further communication and learning. So that's part of this opposition. We're also seeing Venus separating from its square to Uranus. So hopefully as we move into the weekend, you might be feeling a need to break away from something, like with Venus in the third 10-degree section of Aquarius. That's the decan that is all about kind of revisiting something briefly, but then letting it go. And that might be almost an unexpected break of some sort as well. So that's part of what we're coming off of with this. Okay, so let's start breaking down some of these pieces. The last thing I'll say, just big picture, Mars is going to move out of bounds shortly after the moon becomes new. So from the 30th of December all the way till April the 7th. This is a little bit of a challenging experience for Mars, because what Mars is going to be doing is Mars is going to be really acting in a way that is not necessarily the way that we would normally experience martial tendencies. And Laura is asking if Venus is still out of bounds. I don't think that Venus is still out of bounds. I think Venus went back in bounds recently. So that's kind of good, right? Where we might be able to kind of work through Venusian challenges without having to think outside the box necessarily. But with Mars challenges, now, a couple things that you can do with Mars out of bounds. First of all, you have to understand what area of life may be affected by it. Obviously, where Mars is transiting through, Leo, and then through Cancer, these two houses are going to be affected by the Mars out of bounds retrograde transit. But you also will need to understand that Aries and Scorpio topics will also be affected because Mars is trying to provide resources for those topics. So in this randomized Cancer rising chart, this is the chart of the exact new moon in my area of Michigan. This would be Mars in the second house, retrograding back into the first and providing resources for the 10th and the 5th. Second, related to what we put in our bodies, what we consume, what supports us, resources, money, etc. The first house related to the body, our sense of self. And then all of those things could be going through a reevaluation, could be going through a severing and a separating, which is what Mars likes to do. It separates us from, sometimes it'll separate us from a collective vision to go our own way. Sometimes it will separate the spirit from a form that isn't being vitalized anymore by it, so that we can return that old form to the earth and then find a new vehicle, a new form to infuse essence and spirit into. And in this case, Mars would be providing for the 5th house topic of children, of creative projects, of legacies that would happen in a family after death as well. And then also the 10th house of praxis, which is the types of experiences that we have that would be public, that would be visible to the public. So this could be like a reevaluation of your public persona, moving through your second and your first house. And it could be related to your own creative vision, could be related to your children, could be related to your job or your boss or authority figures, etc. So that's just one example of how we can take a planet, we can look at the house that it's moving through, and also understand that in the ancient Greek philosophy, they thought of these planets as deities or gods that were responsible for different temples. And the temple of Scorpio and the temple of Aries are being provided for by its host, Mars. Okay? So those connections are really important to start making if you want to start doing your own astrological transits. Tarja T is here. How you doing, Tarja T? Says, hi from Finland. I have my natal moon at 10 degrees of Capricorn. Oh, well, this will be right on that new moon, right? This new moon will be right on the natal moon. I think you and KP will be having an interesting new moon. I think she has her sun in this space. So I'm wishing you a productive new moon coming up on Monday, friend. And moi, I will say to my friends in Finland. I learned a new word last week. So moi, Tarja. And moi, Susanna, and the other Tarja that comes. We've got multiple Tarjas. But moi to all my Finnish friends. Always appreciate seeing you here. Okay. So let's take a look at the new moon slide related to Capricorn 1 and just talk a little bit more about that before we move forward as to how this might unfold. So Capricorn 1, of course, we see that daimon Asclepius. We talked about that. The ship's Argo, the healer on the ship of the Argo. Yeah, boy, good memory. See, I'm learning. Thank you, Tarja. So Asclepius is an interesting figure. You can also see Asclepius in the sky as the snake handler. It's also called Ophiuchus. So for those of you who had been inundated with the 13th sign, Ophiuchus, that's actually Asclepius, right? It's another name for it. And Austin Coppock calls this decan a headless body, where we are infusing spirit and grounding it into a body to redeem it. There's themes of the redeemer, like different redeemers in history and mythology born around this period of time, and including in the Christian tradition, like Jesus being born around this time, potentially redeeming the flesh through inhabiting it, like a God that inhabits a body. So we may be inhabiting a new body, or trying to inhabit a new body, or a new goal, or a new mission. The Book of T calls this the Lord of Harmonious Change, and the Book of Thoth just the Lord of Change. So this is a really interesting decan where things are up in the air. You can see here in this Two of Pentacles a figure that is juggling two pentacles in the shape of a lemnisket, and that's sort of the path. It's a visual reminder of the path that the sun takes over the course of a solar year, and its transitions and changes of directions at the solstices. So this is pretty interesting to me. It's this figure 8 sign of infinity, but to me, this is a time of both looking back and looking forward. So themes in Capricorn 1, the return of the light, the descent of spirit into matter, embodying the values that we have moving forward, looking at the skeletal structures of our life. Chokmah in Asya is the Kabbalistic sephira of light, it's a flash of light or insight, a flash of material insight. Chokmah is that flash of awareness. Sephira is like the chakra or energy center in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And we have different planets and whatnot associated with this. I believe Chokmah is associated with the zodiac itself. So that's interesting to me, this flash of awareness. Changes of location associated with Capricorn 1. Looking both forward and backwards, we talked about that. Understanding the laws of the land. This is one of the skills of this decan, which is Jupiter ruled. It's a Jupiter ruled face in Saturn ruled Capricorn. So have a unique ability, or people that may have Jupiter in this decan or have other placements here, have a unique ability to make an assessment of the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of a physical place, of a physical project, sometimes they have good business acumen. So this is something to think about. Is the location that you're at serving you? And it doesn't have to be just your home. It could be like, where are you putting your time and your energy? Is that serving you the way that it needs to? Is it helping to provide for the material structures in your life? So some questions you can meditate on, just that are specifically related to Capricorn 1. Where are you going? And where have you been? Okay. both looking both forward and backwards. What type of project are you setting in motion? What type of intentions do you have? Are they realistic? Okay. If you are become too ambitious around this period of time, this is something that a friendly warning. Jupiter expands possibilities and ideas. We probably have a million ideas that we're having difficulty acting on all of them right now. Saturn is in the square. This is another thing that we should talk about with the chart. We have Saturn coming into a square with Jupiter as I record this, and it will start to, I believe it'll be starting to separate after the new moon. But we have to understand our limitations. We can't act on every single idea that we have, and that's really important too. This is the sobriety and the maturity that we see in Capricorn, is to understand our limitations. Where is the best place to build your structures? Structures, and this doesn't have to be some grandiose scale. Here's an example of structures. Like my partner and I bought a new dry erase board to stick on our refrigerator, and it's a much bigger place to write our meal plan for the week, our goals for the week, our grocery list for the week. This is an example of a small structure that is a container, a physical container for all of the ideas that we have in our day-to-day life that will hopefully help us to manage it better. Because we are both visual learners, having a visual reminder of these things is really important, and having it see it more than once, like not just a visual reminder on a phone or something like that, but in our space, like is really important for us to move forward with it. What are the laws of this new land? And this new land could just be the year ahead. What are going to be the new circumstances that you're going to find yourself in personally and collectively? Is your vision sound, or is your focus too narrow? This is important too, where we are really understanding the limitations that we have in our life. When we're visioning, though, I think there are two steps when you're visioning. And this is true when you're creating as well. This is something that I'm thinking about my songwriting teaching days. And when you're visioning, try not to limit yourself too much when you're visioning. Allow yourself to fly free, right? To see the possibilities without judging them right away. Same thing if you're like a songwriter or an artist. Don't edit right away. I used to have this exercise that I would have my class do called object writing. And it was a way to start thinking about the five senses when we are writing lyrics. And what you would do, and I learned this from a guy named Pat Pattison from the Berklee School of Music. He has a great book called Learning to Write Songs or something like that. And what you would do is you set a timer for 10 minutes, and you just kind of stream of consciousness write on a specific topic. But you wouldn't edit yourself. You would try to include the five senses, sensory information. Okay, you'd ground it in that. But you wouldn't edit yourself. Just whatever came out, you just kept writing, and you shouldn't stop writing, just keep writing. Then you can pull out pieces of it that could make good song lyrics. When you're visioning around this period of time, you could have a huge long list of aspirations or things that you want to do. Then you go back and edit it down and say, well, this isn't realistic. This we want to do, but maybe this is a priority for next month, next year, etc. That's when you start making the choices and whittling it back down to what is the actionable steps. Okay, so that's why I would encourage you not to limit your vision too soon in the process. But there will come a time when you have to decide which of those things you want to take action on, and which things will be priorities. One thing that is really working for us is, again, considering who you want to be, not exactly what you want to do. And then what actions in your week, and this is something I've learned from a book called Winning the Week, which action is actually going to make everything else easier? Not which one is the most time sensitive, etc., or the most quote unquote important, but which action is going to make the rest of your life run smoother. And for us, it was that whiteboard. It was that daily schedule. So these are things to really consider. Then finally, how can you inhabit this body in order to redeem or heal it? A lot of times people will make New Year's resolutions around this period of time to quit a habit that is destructive, to try to build in a habit that they want to embody. Both of those are legitimate. I will say, to be able to quit a difficult habit, I've found it much more effective to add in what the opposite type of habit will be, rather than feeling like I'm denying myself something. How can I add in something that will crowd out the old habit? Here's an example. Like, I know a lot of us have little games on their phones, right? I'm no stranger to this. I have a little. Usually, I'll go through cycles of having one game that I will play when I just don't want to think anymore. But sometimes that can spiral out of control, and we find that we've spent more time on the game than on our other priorities. For me, it's a constant battle between wanting to read this large library that I have or zone out on the phone. So how can you, instead of saying, I'm going to quit cold turkey this quote unquote destructive habit, how do you build in the time for reading, for example? How, instead of me saying, I got to delete this game, because I've done that in the past. I've said, I've got this game, I've played it too much, I'm just deleting it, whatever. But inevitably, I always find a new one. Like, it's just a repetitive cycle. But if I say, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm reading 2 40-minute sections a day, that 2 blocks of 40 minutes where I set a timer, I'm going to read, I'm going to engage with that. And oftentimes I'll read more than that, because once I get into it, I don't want to stop, But I do think, like, just building that small habit in can crowd out the other habit that you don't want to do. So whatever that looks like for you, I really think that that's a great way to start with building new healthy structures within your life. Laura says, I couldn't do it without my massive whiteboard. Notes, appointments, items to remember. Awesome. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Having the visual reminder is such a game changer. We have a dry erase calendar that is 2 months. It should be 3, but 2 months is enough. And it has we write all the aspects on it for the day, which is very labor intensive, but it has all the appointments, all the scheduling stuff. And it's really, really helpful not to lose things in the wash of life that we experience. Laura Elizabeth says, my son with sun, moon, and ascendant in the 3rd decan of Capricorn is moving from his home of 17 years to a new home coming this week. I love the idea of the protective spirit of a place coinciding with his move. Yes, excellent, Laura. Yeah, just he will probably feel a little bit out of place at first, right? Think about the moon in its exile. A moon in a place that it's not necessarily comfortable yet, but he will be learning the new laws of the land, right? The new ways to, where the grocery store is, what the neighbors are like, all of those things. And I think that we need to just give ourselves time and space around that, right? And it's exciting to have a new move, but having patience with the process is going to be important. But yeah, like having him connect with the land itself, I think is going to be really healthy moving forward. So I wish him the best of luck, friend. All right, so let's go back. What I'd like to do before I go back to the chart is I just want to spend a little bit more time on Saturn as host. So we've talked about the 1st decan of Capricorn. Now let's look at Saturn and what Saturn is trying to provide for this new moon. So here we see the 9 of Cups. In the 9 of Cups, we see a satisfied character. I believe he is an allusion to a Shakespearean character. His name somewhat escapes me. I think it is Falstaff, but I could be mistaken on that. But this was a self-satisfied character that was sort of a little bit arrogant, a little bit puffed up. And we have the danger of being a little bit too self-satisfied in this decan, although confidence sometimes is important. We have to balance our confidence with overconfidence or arrogance, etc. Now this card, a lot of tarot slingers really think of this as like the wish fulfillment card. Book T calls it the Lord of Material Happiness, or in the Book of Thoth calls it the Lord of Happiness. Austin Coppock in his book 36 Faces calls it the net. And I believe that's a reference to Indra's net, which is sort of like the fabric of reality, the types of the reality behind the curtain, so to speak. All the connections, like again, the mycelial networks that our lives show us as fruiting mushroom bodies, right? So think about our reality as what we see as the fruiting body of the mushroom. Everything that connects us is that mycelial network, and it's vast, and there's all these connections and communications, and we start to sprout up like a mushroom as an individual, but we're still connected underground or invisibly with this Indra's net, I guess you could say. So understanding those connections is really important. Understanding that to be able to have a fruiting body in your life or a life, you have to understand the visual creative components of the spiritual awareness that leads to it. So themes in this decan, and this before I go to that, the spirit in this decan is Dolos, and Dolos was the apprentice of Prometheus, who tried to craft humanity from clay, like Prometheus, mimicking his teacher, his master, but ran out of clay when he got to the feet, and he crafted pseudo-logos, which means falsehood, and Prometheus crafted aletheia, meaning truth. So falsehood, pseudo-logos, it can't run the same way that the truth can. Eventually, if we're not being honest with ourselves about our abilities, about our true desires, etc., it'll fall flat on its face. And so this is really a lesson in understanding both limitations and how to work through that. Other themes that we see with this decan: harmonizing our inner and outer reality, finding the what isn't, how much is enough, finding satisfaction, right? The opposite decan with this, like in Virgo, where it might be an experience where we're feeling like we need to keep working on something, that we need to keep perfecting something. Whereas if you have planets in Pisces too, you might be like, well, it's good enough. Like I've done as much as I can do. I'm going to just release this and let the divine, it's going to have a life of its own eventually. So this decan can also represent the power of intention, wishful thinking, setting the intention and then letting it go, rather than setting an intention and then working at the craft. Now that may seem counterintuitive in Capricorn season, but let me tell you, sometimes less is more. Sometimes when you focus on a more humble task, like if your schedule is working for you, rather than, I want to achieve this grandiose goal or this long laundry list of tasks. If you say, you know what, I want to wake up at a certain time and I want to drink a gallon of water each day. Those are humble tasks that can lead to greater unfoldings, right? So the power of your intention could lead to something as long as you surrender to it, right? You have to surrender to those things. So this is a decan associated with Yesod. Yesod is a lunar decan, a lunar sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life, which is sort of the birth canal. So any 9 in the tarot teaches you about the visualization process before manifestation, Malkuth, which is the 10s. So here we're having the dream before it comes into reality, okay? So the shaping of reality before manifestation. This decan also is associated with dissolving boundaries between worlds and dimensions. Because Saturn is here, we might feel that there's more of a boundary, right? More of a challenge, more of a distance, more of a gap between our dream and what we're actually experiencing, and that can be frustrating. This decan also teaches us to flow with the Tao, right? Indra's net, interconnectedness. The Tao, now I could spend hours and hours trying to verbalize an ineffable concept, but to me, the Tao is acceptance. The Tao is the natural forces of life, the currents of life. I mean, you could consider it like the force on some level. but it's everything that connects us. It is, uh, imagine when you are in alignment with the Tao, you are on a little boat on a stream, and you are allowing it to carry you where it is going. Whereas when you are fighting against the Tao, against the natural flow, current, you're trying to paddle upstream and you're exhausting yourself and you're still being carried downstream, but you're just tired. You're just unhappy. So coming into alignment with the Tao to me is accepting parts of your life that are either unchangeable or in alignment with your true nature. Again, I'll use my partner and I's conversation as an example. By accepting our own flavor of neurodivergence, one that sometimes gets caught in liminal spaces, we are stopping the self-recrimination of not being the same as everyone else. That is a huge, huge burden to take off of your back or plate or whatever, if you have some version of this. To not beat yourself up in infinitude because your life doesn't look exactly like the Hallmark card, because the holiday that you just had didn't meet the whatever the Lifetime channel movie representation of it, or the 1950s idealized version of Christmas that we seem to be perpetually stuck in America. That's painful sometimes. But when you start to accept that maybe your life looks different, maybe you need more time and space, maybe you need some daydreaming time, maybe you need containers to capture all of these details because your brain doesn't work exactly like someone else's. Man, that is grace that you're giving to yourself. It really can change things, because then you're not feeling guilty or sad or beating yourself up all the time. You're accepting yourself for who you are and trying to work with that nature, with that Tao, rather than against it. You can also have this decan represent optimism, but naivete. Okay, we have stories of Dolos, the apprentice, but also Phaethon, the son of Helios, who asked his father to drive the chariot of the sun before he was really ready to do so. And Helios begged him not to do it. But he wanted to prove his divine parentage. He says, "You can ask me anything. I'm your father." And he says, "Well, if you're my dad, let me drive that chariot." And he's like, "Anything but that, son." And because he knew that he wasn't ready and it was a difficult task. But he relented, and the sun basically couldn't control the 4 white horses that drove the chariot of the sun. And he was burning up the ground by flying too low, and he was making it too cold by flying too high. And eventually Zeus came along and was like, "This is not working out." And thunderbolted him out of the sky, and he fell into a river and drowned, the Eurydanos. So the Icarus story on some level, right? Trying not to fly too close to the sun. Similar energy in this decan. Okay, we can overestimate our abilities, and this is a cautionary tale not to do so. Now, if it was Jupiter, we might be people. I've seen people with Jupiter in this decan, second decan Pisces. They're just lucky. They're like, it'll work out. I don't have to think about this. It'll just. They're blessed on some level. But Saturn here says you better be realistic, or there will be consequences, right? Saturn is a planet of consequences of our actions. So something to ask yourself about Saturn hosting this new moon in Capricorn 1. What vision are you trying to manifest? Getting clear on that is important. How can you close the gap between your dream and its form? How can you castrate the things that aren't ready to be manifested so that you can bring the most important parts of it into form? Can you make a wish and then release the how? This is a toughie. This is a toughie for us Virgo stelliums, myself included. I'm very obsessed with the how, and sometimes I'll be humbled by life, like the how isn't working, but I'm really attached to it, and sometimes I'll just have to release and let go, and then the divine will bring a course correction. And that often happens. And it can be painful, it can be humbling and humiliating, but ultimately it can be for our highest good. Where would faith help you flow with the currents of your life? Another interesting thing, and I will say this, we're going to talk a little bit about the North Node moving into Pisces. And this is a condition where the need to have faith and release the how is going to become increased. We're going to need to release some of our rigidity about the method or the form. Okay. What compromises are necessary to find acceptance and satisfaction? This is important too. Like as a somewhat of a perfectionist myself, knowing when something is good enough is an important life lesson. I used to draw as a kid. I was as a Virgo stellium, my desire was for something to look as photorealistic and detailed as possible. And there were times where I achieved that. Did this drawing of a gorilla that was really, it really looked very lifelike. But there were other times when I would get fixated, first of all, on like one piece, like an eye. I like to draw faces a lot, and I would get fixated on the eye, and I would spend 2 hours on the eye, and I would just be erasing and erasing, and the rest of the face wouldn't even fit. Or I would erase a hole in the paper. So 2 things I learned from that. First of all, sometimes you need to begin with the end in mind. If you just start with one piece of something, you can get too fixated on it, and then the rest of it doesn't fit. So having at least a general idea of the shape of the face is important. Second of all, there is a concept in Japanese art called wabi-sabi. I believe that's the concept. And it's the idea that you leave the last 10% or so of a piece of art rough, natural. And that is the divine completing the task for you. And there's beauty in that. And I really believe that this is part of the Piscean mission, is to leave part of it for the divine to finish. And you don't have to control every facet and phase of it. Okay. And then finally, how can you align with fate to prosper? This is about letting go of the oars and not exhausting yourself, swimming in a direction that is not in alignment with your life. I know that we have a lot of aspirational images through social media, through our movies and television, etc. But sometimes our lives don't necessarily have to look like everyone else's. Most of the time they don't. And learning what works for us and aligning with our own fate is really, I think, a key to happiness. We can have a beautiful externalized life that isn't in alignment with who we really are, okay? And that doesn't make us happy. I'm sure that there's people out, like, for example, like holiday season. I'm not a super social person. I always felt really uncomfortable at holidays, because there's just too much stimulus. I'm I'm a highly sensitive person, I guess, if you wanted to give it a name. I've since really cut back on the festivities over the years, and that's more in alignment with my particular nature. And that doesn't mean that it's better or worse. If you're somebody who is an extrovert, who really enjoys getting together with a large group of people, then that's in alignment with your nature. Okay, but accepting which of those is true for you, I think, is a way to come into alignment with what will truly make you happy. There are people out there that are probably highly sensitive people like me and introverts that are forced into very big social gatherings around the holidays, and they're probably miserable. And maybe the opposite. Maybe there's people that are really extroverted, but they people in their family have passed, or they might be feeling loneliness, and maybe working towards finding community and friendship outside of those family relationships might be in alignment with their Tao. Okay, So it's different for different folks, but understanding yourself is part of this. All right. Cosmic Girl 101 is here. It says, good morning, everyone from Australia. How you doing, Spencer? I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay, Cosmic Girl. I'm clearing out some of the clutter in my life and in my head and in my body, and it feels good. That this was a little bit of the week leading up to this, Cosmic Girl. We had a T-square between Jupiter, Mercury, and Saturn, so we might have felt pulled in a lot of different directions, and we're starting to get some of the Mars-Pluto opposition themes coming in, but I think that having good containers and new containers and adjustments, that's something that I'm really finding some joy in this week. Thomas is here. What's up, Tom? Says namaste, Spencer, and everyone from cloudy, drying out, chilly San Francisco. Hope your holidays are joyous. I miss you all the last few Fridays, but I was substituting in high schools. Oh, nice, Tom. Oh, I'm glad that you're getting out there and leading the youth of tomorrow. That's a nice service that you're doing, my friend. So I hope that you're doing well and that you're thriving over there in San Francisco and imparting some of your wisdom. Lauren says, with Saturn in Pisces transiting my 4th house, my son lifted me with tickets to the opera Falstaff for Christmas this year. So synchronistic. That's interesting, Laura, right? So I was right. Falstaff, right? Sorry, we've got some extraneous noise coming on here, but so yeah, that is cool, right? Because Saturn is in that decan. Maybe you found some truth within that, with those themes potentially. But I'm glad that your son gifted you with something that is lifting your spirit. KP says, wow, Saturn is sitting right on my 14-degree Pisces North node. Oh my goodness. So probably some interesting reality checks with Saturn on the North node and binding you to some of these themes. Saturn is a planet that binds us to our responsibilities and requires us to fulfill our commitments or suffer consequences because of it. So I hope that you're finding your commitments manageable without unnecessary consequences. All right, so let's go back to the chart. And as I do so, let's take this moment to take a little stretch, get a drink of water, take care of your body. If you could do me a huge favor, if you could like this video, that would go a long way to spreading the word. And if you're new here, welcome, and I hope that you're subscribed to the channel, but please subscribe to the channel and also to the newsletter if you want to get some updates on when we're going live again, different classes and offerings and coupons. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you get 10% off any reading. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. Okay, stretching that body out, getting a little drink. All right, friends, so we've got our chart back up here. And let's take a look at the first aspect that we're going to see as the new moon unfolds. So on we've got the new moon on the inner chart, the inner wheel. This is a bi-wheel. And then we have the first aspect on the outside. So this is our first aspect that the moon is going to make to a traditional planet when it is released from the bond. So the bond is sort of a traditional technique or experience where the moon is within 15 degrees of the sun and it's not necessarily visible. So once the moon starts to become visible, it's released from the bond, and the moon being a planet of manifestation, it is able to begin to manifest the job or the impetus that the sun infused into the moon at the conjunction, okay, at the new moon. And the first aspect that it makes can kind of show us some of either the gifts or challenges that we might be experiencing. Now, this one's really interesting to me because the first aspect that we have is a conjunction with Pluto, but also the opposition to Mars. So we could look at it as, the outer planets coloring this, but we want to look at that first traditional planet that it's aspecting. So we've got the moon together with Pluto, first 10-degree section of Aquarius, opposing retrograde Mars in Leo. And this again, this is a challenging potential aspect for the moon, where we might be feeling cast out. We might be feeling like we want to leave a situation because it's not in alignment with our own personal values. Maybe there's a clash of wills that we're getting into that could lead to a separation. You have Leo 1 being related to the Five of Wands, where we're competing for attention, or maybe we're competing for the spotlight. And again, I really feel like a lot of the themes with this opposition that we're experiencing with Mars and Pluto, but that are going to be activated by the moon, are ones of our individual will versus the needs of the collective or the group, or the fears that we have of losing our sense of individuality within the group. I think Pluto is a planet that brings things up from beneath the surface. And it often shows us things that we're afraid of. And in Aquarius, sometimes we're afraid of losing our individuality within the collective or the group. Maybe Aquarius is sometimes often associated with technology. We're seeing some fears come up around technology and whether we are adapting to that technology or not. And maybe we have different beliefs around that. So all of those themes can be coming to the fore. Now, as we see this unfold, I'm going to move this forward. On January the 2nd, we have Jupiter escaping its malefic enclosure. This is interesting too. As I started recording this today on Friday, we had Mercury making a square to Saturn, and that began the malefic enclosure of Jupiter, malefic enclosure is when Saturn and Mars are making an aspect to a traditional planet, and sort of putting pressure on it from a lot of different directions. So here you had Saturn making a square to this side of Gemini, where Jupiter is hanging out, and then we had Mars making its aspect on the other side, kind of closing it in. Well, on the 2nd, it's released from that condition. I believe, what is the planet that is releasing it? I'm trying to see here which planet is releasing this. I think it's probably because we have I'm thinking. Well, I'm not exactly sure why it stops at that point, but it does. Oh, that's what it is. Sorry. Sorry for the brain short out. It's Venus moving into Pisces. So Venus will start breaking up that malefic enclosure. It just wasn't into Pisces yet, so it was hard for me to see it. I apologize for that. But Venus will be making its ray, its square aspect ray, in between the position that Mars is putting that in eventually. Okay, so you'll see here, it's going to be putting its ray on this side. That's kind of, it's sometimes it's challenging to see some of these things, but the best way to look at that is, first of all, here's just a little lesson on this. Where is this ray landing? And then where is for Mars? And then where is the ray from Saturn landing? And is that enclosing the planet? And is there any other planet that is casting its aspectual ray in between that space? So in this case, Venus will be casting its ray and breaking that up. Okay? But between now and January 2nd, there may be some challenges around Jupiter issues. And there may be some challenges around the Pisces and the Sagittarian area of your life as well. Now, on the 2nd as well, we have Mercury exiting its retrograde shadow at about, let's go back to the 2nd, at about 22 degrees of Sagittarius. Now remember, I talked about this very earlier last month when Mercury retrograded. This is its fixed star, 22 degrees of Sagittarius, that is related to Asclepius. Okay, it's a fixed star called Ras Al Hague. And so there are medical issues that come up when we have uh, a planet hitting this 22 degrees of Sagittarius. And during the Mercury retrograde period, we had the whole United Healthcare CEO situation, and a lot of the questions. Mercury is a planet that asks questions about our healthcare system in America, and whether it was just, whether it was fair, etc. So these themes might be starting to move forward again as Mercury crosses over that point and starts traversing new ground. We also are seeing Venus moving into Pisces. So this is kind of exciting. Venus is exalted in Pisces, which, according to traditional dignity doctrine, this is a place that Venus thrives. This is a place where Venus is the honored guest in Jupiter's house. So this is a place where we might be able to more easily manifest a vision. We may be attracting things just by visualizing them and letting them come to us. We may also be better able to harmonize with other people because Pisces is a house that tends to dissolve boundaries between people. Okay, so Venus is helping to harmonize the things that separate us. So we have that happening on the 2nd as well, and breaking up that malefic enclosure of Jupiter. Now, when we get to the 3rd, that's when we have the Mars-Pluto opposition perfecting. Okay, so here's the 3rd, where we have Mars at 1 degree of Leo and Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius. I think we've broken that down in pretty good depth, I would say. But just watch out for issues with that, just conflicts around individuality versus the needs of the collective. This is something else where Mars can bring conflict to situations that have been repressed for too long. It's volcanic. I think Mars-Pluto aspects, especially hard aspects like oppositions and squares, feels like a volcano erupting because we've maybe pressed something down for too long and then it starts erupting and we have to deal with it. And it can lead to a separation or a severing potentially as well. When we get to the 6th, we've kind of got a big day on January the 6th. That's our first quarter moon. So I'm going to go to the first quarter moon aspect here. So this is the sun square the moon. So there you see 16 degrees of Aries. The moon is squaring the 16-degree Capricorn sun. Simultaneously, Mars is retrograding back into Cancer that day. So that is interesting to me because the moon is going to be hosted by that by that Mars. I don't know why I'm saying all of the wrong planets today. I apologize for that. But the Mars is going to be hosting that first quarter moon. Now, what does that first quarter moon mean? So this is the unfolding of this lunar cycle. First quarter moons are sort of existential crises or crises of bringing something into manifestation. So when the sun is in Capricorn 2, that's related to the 3 of Pentacles decan. And that decan shows us the cooperation that is necessary between the artist, the clergy, and the government official, building an ornate structure. So we might have an ambitious project that we're working on where we need cooperation from different parts of our milieu. Now, the second decan of Aries talks about royal decrees. It says, I've broken away from the collective, and here is what I believe in. It's very much saying, this is what I believe in. So there might be a conflict in working together with others at the first quarter moon because of our own personal belief system. And we might not feel like we fit in with the group that was trying to build an ornate structure. And that isn't going to be any easier with Mars retrograding into its fall in Cancer. Okay? Mars is exalted in Capricorn. It does very well there, structured and slowing down, patience, cooling it off. But when Mars is in Cancer, it is a challenging place for Mars because Mars is given resources of the moon. It's giving the resources of the body, the resources of our domestic situations, the situations that we would normally seek comfort within. It's going to be challenging. Now, there is a mutual reception between the moon and Mars on this day. So, despite the uncomfortability of both of those placements, there might be a solution potentially. Like the mutual reception when planets are in difficult spaces or in difficult aspects, like the moon being squared the sun. Some people have compared that to like two drunks supporting themselves as they're stumbling home, type of thing. Like they're both in bad shape, but somehow they're getting to the finish line. So consider that as you're moving forward as well. Laura has Laura's son's birthday, 26th birthday is on the 6th. So happy birthday to your son, Laura, and hope that you have a good celebration. Okay, so this is our first quarter moon. We've got the Mars retrograde back into Cancer, and then we're going to see on the 8th, Mercury is going to change signs into Capricorn and immediately square the nodes. So this is what's been happening with planets ingressing into Capricorn recently, with the nodes of the moon being in Aries and Libra. Is the closer the nodes get to the ingress into Pisces and Virgo, they're at the very early degrees of the cardinal signs Aries and Libra. So right when the planet goes into a new sign, usually we feel that as a shift in energy, but we feel it really intensely when these planets are squaring the nodes. When a planet is squaring the nodes of the moon, it is generally a turning point. It feels like a crossroads, of fate, a fated event that feels like a crossroads. So we might be starting to ask questions about those Capricorn themes. Where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? What resources do we have? And it may be a pivotal moment from moving away from being dependent on others, or even asking permission with others, with the South Node in Libra, or moving away from a feeling of everything needing to be fair or righteous indignation, because we have the Uranus associated with that decan of Libra, and moving towards more independence with Mercury starting to move towards the North Node in Aries. Now, it's fascinating to me that we have Mercury at the bending of the nodes right before the nodes shift. So Mercury might be moving more towards that independent nature, but it's going to be, eventually coming together with the North Node in Pisces, not Aries. So think about that for a second. Maybe if you're feeling an intense individualistic drive at this bending of the Mercury nodes experience, you may have to surrender a little bit of that as we move forward with the nodal shift, and we'll talk about that in a second too. On the 9th, both the moon and Mercury go out of bounds. So not only is Mercury at the bending of the nodes, but it is going to be out of the normal declination path of the sun, as well as the moon. So this is a period of time between the 9th and about the 20th, where these planets are going to be, at least Mercury is going to be out of bounds. The moon is going to be out of bounds for about 5 days after this. But this could be a little bit of a shakeup, right? Where we're not acting as we normally would, or in the way that is quote unquote socially acceptable. We may not be communicating in a way that we normally would. So just be careful about your communications. It can also help you have ideas that are outside the box, which I think can be really helpful sometimes. And you can see that echoed with the moon's conjunction with Uranus at a similar point in that day. Then we get to the 11th, and we have the nodes making their shift into Pisces and Virgo. So there it is, January the 11th. And we've talked about this in more depth on my forecast for January, so I won't go too far into it here today. But just to review, the North Node is a place of increase. The South Node a place of decrease. Evolutionary astrologers think of the North Node as a place that we're trying to grow towards, and the South Node is some things so habits to release. Jyotish astrologers think of the North Node as a hungry demon who has had its head severed after consuming the elixir of immortality, so that he can't die, but he also can never get what he needs, satisfaction. So this unending hunger. Whereas the South Node is the body that we're trying to process and release things through. Now, the Eastern philosophy guides people towards release, guides people towards release of attachment. So they are really more, they feel more in alignment with Ketu, the South Node, than Rahu, right? But each of them have their own functions. I will say, from my perspective, a balance between the two is important. I don't subscribe to the evolutionary astrology thought that we have to go towards our natal North Node to have success. I think that there are going to be situations where you have to utilize your South Node experiences. You need to release some of those things for success. And you may have to increase some of the topics of the North Node. But I think that there is an equilibrium and a balance point between those two. So what we will be seeing increased, probably first of all, just very literally, an increased awareness of our oceans and waterways, number one. Whatever that means, like when you have the North Node and prominent planets in Pisces, there's oceanic themes. So thinking about the oceans, probably coming more up in our collective. I would also say that increasing an awareness of the mycelial networks, the mycelial spiritual and communal networks that connect us. It's probably an increase in going with the flow, or a necessity to go with the flow, and a release of our attachment to the old forms. It is coming into alignment with essence rather than getting too attached to form. And I think that this is coming at a really important moment in history. We're at a crisis point with the climate. We're at a crisis point with our material structures, and we do have to make important changes to be able to continue to survive and to thrive, and for a more fair and just society to be formed. And when we get too attached to form, right, then that's when the real conflicts start to come out. So releasing our attachment to the form that it takes while pursuing the vision. But on the flip side, I will say this: if you get too lost in the vision and you are not being practical or not taking tangible actions towards that vision, you just end up spinning your wheels. So to me, it is very much a balance between those two. Having the vision, surrendering, but also when spirit, the divine life, shows you the actions to take, you have to co-create and take those actions with it, right? So to me, that's a real pivotal moment too for 2025. And then we get to the full moon on the 13th. So here's the full moon of this cycle. And it's at 23 degrees of Cancer, opposing the 23-degree Capricorn moon, or sun, excuse me. I'll do it again. I think Mercury is tripping me up today. Mercury is in its exile, squaring Saturn as we're recording this, opposing Jupiter. It helps me to fumble the words today, but thank you for your patience with that. So this full moon in Cancer, moon in its own home, so a more comfortable moon, although it is applying to Mars retrograde in Cancer. The sun in Capricorn 3 brings an awareness of our responsibilities, an awareness of how we administrate power, authority, etc. This axis talks about both hoarding resources and power and then refusing it and thinking about what to do with surplus, how to let it go. So questions of scarcity versus surplus, about consolidation of wealth versus distribution of it, all of those things I think will be coming to the fore at the full moon in Cancer. But we will do another live stream and break that down for you as well. All right. So that, my friends, is what we have here for today. So what I'm going to do is I am going to do an I Ching and an animal for you for this lunation. The I Ching that I got for you was number 28, which translates to critical mass, and it is changing to hexagram number 32, which is endurance or enduring. So 28 translates to too much, overload, critical mass, taking a stand and setting priorities and also making choices. So when we have too much on our plate, we have to prioritize and we have to make choices. We have to let go of some of them, and then we have to move forward on the ones that are our highest priorities. So Jack Balkin, in his beautiful book, The Laws of Change, says the circumstances have reached a point of crisis. You face great pressure from all directions. Perhaps you've taken on too much, or perhaps obligations and expectations that were at one point bearable and reasonable, but have slowly but surely increased to the point that they have become too great. Whatever the case, something needs to be done, and quickly. You must make a transition to a new situation without delay. Nevertheless, you cannot force matters. A sudden movement of the ridgepole, this hexagram talks about a ridgepole that supports something, like a roof that is sagging, right? It says a sudden movement of the ridgepole under great stress will snap it and bring the whole roof crashing down. In the same way, the stresses and strains of the situation cannot be relieved by rash action. Instead, you must carefully consider the underlying causes of the crisis that you now find yourself in. There's too much in the situation, but you need to figure out what that too much is. Perhaps you've overestimated what you can do because you're too eager to get ahead, or because you lack the necessary skills or talents. Sounds a lot like Saturn and Pisces too, does it not? Like the overestimating our abilities to the point where maybe we're crashing the chariot of the sun into the ground. The changing line, let's go with the changing line here. We have the fifth place is changing. It says, a withered willow puts forth flowers. An old woman takes a young husband. No blame, but no praise. This is an interesting changing line. Okay. Jack goes on to say, in line 2, the metaphors offer the hope of renewal. The metaphors in line 5 symbolize an attempt at renewal that is fruitless. Flowers exhaust the energies of the withered willow and hasten its end. An older woman may marry a younger man, but she still will not be able to bear children. In both cases, the renewal does not succeed because the foundations were not appropriate. The expression no blame, no praise means that the situation is simply laid bare and presented as it is. He goes on to say, you are faced with a difficult and critical problem. You must assess them realistically rather than place your hopes on an uncertain adventure or a last gasp effort. You need to get to the heart of the matter and look deeply into the foundations of the current situation. Find out what the real problems are and take action before things get out of hand. If you ignore the roots of the difficulty, your solutions will not last. This line also offers advice about cooperation with others. In difficult times, people are often tempted to forge alliances with people above and forsake the people below. They try to curry favor with powerful and influential people and forget the people who they regard as less powerful or beneath them. Do not be a fair-weathered friend. Your relations with people should not depend on whether they can help you in your current milieu, in the current milieu. This is not the proper basis for trust or cooperation, and ultimately will begin instability and humiliation. So this is an important warning, I think, sometimes for Capricorn season as well. Capricorn is the ambitious mountain/sea goat, right? It is related to climbing a mountain, getting to the top. And I think this is a warning not to step on people on the way to the top. You know, if you want to get to the top with your friends and family, sometimes it's a little slower. Sometimes you have to make compromises. Sometimes you don't always get what you want in the moment. And it's a lesson in humility and a lesson in maybe allowing for a circuitous path rather than just getting what you want by any means necessary. Hexagram number 32, which it's changing to, translates to endurance or enduring, constancy, long-lasting, perseverance, duration. What I find interesting about this hexagram is the I Ching talks about things that endure because they change, not because they are rigid. That to me is a really important lesson because they're fluid, they're flexible, right? So this is talking about, and I'll read this. It says, things endure not because they do not change, but because they do change. They grow, they evolve, they respond, and in this way, they continue. The symbol of the internal is not the unchanging, but the cycle, which is a process of constant movement and alteration governed by principles of order. In a cycle, every beginning results from a previous ending, and every endpoint is followed by a new beginning. What endures are not the momentary manifestations of a physical reality, but the basic principles that shape change and give it order and continuity. So it's really talking about the values that endure, but the forms change, and we need to be flexible and flow with these changes. Life is constantly bringing us opportunity for change. I think, again, we can't avoid pain. Sometimes change is painful, friends. But suffering happens when we are so idealistic about the changes in our lives that we are really swimming upstream with the current. Now, there are certain situations where we have to be firm and stand our ground, and our values are completely out of alignment with the changes happening. I get that. But there's other times where we're having to figure out how we fit in to the changes that are happening. And sometimes that requires experimentation, figuring out how to use new systems, new technologies, new relationships, new situations. And by being flexible, by understanding how we can navigate the currents of our life, that's how we endure and create a legacy. That's how we keep going on the path rather than get stuck in the past. It's hard. It's hard. I am a bit of a late adapter, I will say. I'm not someone that easily adapts to either new things, new technologies, new ideas. But I'm trying to be flexible, and I'm trying to at least consider the advantages and disadvantages of something new before I reject it. And I think that is the most important thing. Eventually, you may find that you do reject something. But if we reject something before we completely understand it, I think that's part of the thing that might lead to the suffering. So some really interesting themes coming up with the I Ching here. Now, the animal I got for you is a really powerful one. Got the eagle. The eagle is a very powerful symbol of freedom, but also a symbol of being able to rise above your mundane concerns and to be able to see things through their very keen eyesight and long-range vision. They're fish birds, right? They are able to dive into bodies of water. Bodies of water in metaphysics are often represented by emotions, but also spirituality. So being able to dive into our emotions and come out with something useful, to be able to dive into our spiritual selves and into the nets that connect us, like Indra's net, to be able to dive into our visions and our dreams, to be able to start thinking about where we want to go, could be helpful with the eagle. It's a fierce hunter. It's an intense, the look of intensity. I think it's a really great message to not get bogged down during Capricorn season and the Capricorn new moon on the form itself. To be able to manifest, you need to know where you're going. You need to trust your spirit and your higher intuition, and you need to rise above. I think the eagle is an excellent bird to help us rise above some of our petty concerns that we may have, right? How can we see the bigger picture? How can we see the greater vision? Okay, how can we aspire towards something great while figuring out and surrendering to where life is taking us? So that is what I've got for you today. Oh my goodness. Laura, thank you so much for the super sticker, friend. That's very generous. I appreciate you. Really appreciate that, friend. Thank you so much. And happy birthday to your son, and I hope that you all have a good unfolding. And happy Happy upcoming birthday to you too, friend. Rachel says the Eagles from The Hobbit. Ooh, I like that, Rachel. I like that. That's so cool. Rachel is one of our Hobbit book clubbers, and yeah, the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien has these giant eagles that come and rescue people at very at crisis moments, right? They lift people away from crisis. So how can we lift ourselves away from crisis through connecting with the eagle spirit to just get to a higher vantage point, to get to a safe space, to get to a platform that will allow us to see things as they really are, rather than getting caught and embroiled in the lower nature or the lower conflict. So yeah, great catch there, Rachel. All right, my friends, that is what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Do me a huge favor. Like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel and the email list. Go check me out over at spencermichaud.com if you want to sign up for a reading or sign up for our Dignity and Devotion webinar on the Sun on Saturday, February the 8th. And then if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me at Spencer Michaud on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on Threads, etc. I would love to be able to connect with you in that way as well. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you today. Have a wonderful, wonderful new moon, a wonderful weekend, a wonderful January, and I will see you in 2 weeks. I'm taking next week off to kind of reset everything, but we'll see you in 2 weeks, and I hope that you have a wonderful time moving forward. Be kind to yourself. Be super kind to yourself. Give yourself extra space to figure out these new systems. Accept the flow of your life, and that'll help you to spread that kindness out into the world. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. Thank you so much, friends. Appreciate you, and we'll see you the next time.